Redeeming Money: How God Reveals and Reorients Our Hearts. Written by Paul David Tripp. Narrated by Bevan Greiner. Chapter 1. Putting on the Right Glasses. We sat next to each other on a bus from Chinatown in New York to Chinatown in Philadelphia. I'd had a long and tiring ministry weekend, and I didn't feel like talking to anybody. But we were cramped together on the very last seat on the bus. So I said hello and asked him what was taking him to Philly. He told me he lived in Philly and asked me what I had been doing in New York. After telling him I had been participating in a Christian conference, he immediately informed me that he was an atheist and just didn't see the point of organized religion. Thus began a 2-hour-long conversation. As I listened to him, 3 things got my attention. First was the surety with which he spoke. At 28 years old, he was convinced that he had it all figured out. He had not been a philosophy major, and he had only casual knowledge of the religions of the world, and almost no knowledge of what Christianity was about. But he was sure. He was a theologian, but he had no idea that he was. He didn't have a neutral view of the nature of life. Rather, he carried in his mind an organized system of thought about life, death, identity, meaning, and purpose, what was, what is, and what will come. He would have called himself irreligious, but he was just as theologically inclined as I was. I was then struck by the vast assumptions he made about all that is. He was not nervous that he might be proved wrong. He didn't seek to validate his assumptions. He assumed the logic of his atheism, that it was logically and scientifically provable, and he felt sorry for those of us who hang on to our invalid religious mysticism. He had no source book like the Bible to validate his viewpoints, but he was at rest with profoundly important assumptions about the nature of life and reality. Finally, as I listened to my new friend, it hit me that every morning he put on a set of glasses through which he saw everything in life. I don't mean physical glasses. He seemed to see quite well without assistance. I mean that he looked at everything in life through his set of interpretive glasses. Everything we talked about, and everything he encountered or thought about, was seen and understood through the lens of his atheism. His identity, sexuality, money, relationships, morality, view of history, politics, and everything else in which he participated or thought about was connected to his view of life. He was thoughtful and smart. He was serious about life, but sadly, he was wearing the wrong set of glasses. What he thought he saw and understood clearly, he saw with dramatic distortion. What seemed obvious to him wouldn't have seemed obvious if he had taken off his glasses. And if he were wearing another set of philosophical, theological glasses, he would understand everything in a different way. I have written about this before, and will probably write about it again. No one is neutral in the way he or she thinks about life. No one is truly open-minded. Everyone carries with them a worldview that shapes their understanding of everything. Everyone is a philosopher. Everyone is a theologian. All are meaning makers. We never leave our lives alone. We constantly dig through the pile of our experiences, seeking to make sense of what has happened and is happening to us. We form positions on everything, and those positions shape the decisions we make, the actions we take, and the words we say. This is why it is both impossible and dangerous to start a book about money by talking about money. You just can't understand anything in isolation. Everything in our lives is connected to everything else, and everything is shaped by what we understand to be true. Handling money right, being in control of it, not being controlled by it, and not asking it to do for you what it was never intended to do, requires examining the worldview that should shape how we think about money and everything else in our lives.